Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Alumni Association and Business Alumni Board, welcome to Homecoming 2021. I'm Derek Legg, President of the Business Alumni Board and proud member of the class of 2016. To ensure you experience this virtual event in the best way, I'm going to ask you to go to the top right corner of your Zoom screen and click the speaker view. This is going to make sure that you see the highlighted and pinned speakers during the panel. At the end of the panel, we will have a quick Q&A session. Feel free to ask questions in the Zoom chat at the bottom of the screen for either the group as a whole or a specific panelist. When submitting a question, please make sure you message the everyone option in the chat. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce today's moderator. She is a wonderful person whom I greatly respect. Rebecca Smith, Executive Director of Career Services at PLNU. Now I'm going to pass the reins over to Rebecca.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Really excited to be here with all of you and talking about our business leaders and how they had a chance to not only get through 2020, but even thrive and dream and succeed. So just a few weeks ago, Forbes magazine on the 5th of January, 2021, published a feature about the 3 predictions of the future of work. And the 3 predictions were about the rise of entrepreneurship and the side hustle, the fact that we are going to be remote and yet connected, and then this focus on impact, really going beyond input, really looking at measuring what matters, outcomes, accomplishments. And when I think about our 3 panelists today, our 3 guests, they're definitely going to talk about these 3 predictions, which really are not so much predictions anymore in just a few weeks later. These are now realities for us in 2021. We're definitely talking about entrepreneurship. We're talking about the fact that we are remote yet connected and probably will be so for much of our work. And then finally, it's absolutely about impact. And for those of us who care about making a difference in this world, which is absolutely what our university is all about, that impact is absolutely where we want to be. So I want to introduce our 3 guests, and then I am going to throw a big question at them and just see where they go with it. So first of all, I'm going to introduce Christina Hastings, who is in corporate communications. She is at Alumni. She is also the chair of an affinity group called Women United, which is with the San Diego County United Way, which has been here in our region for 100 years. And really, really pleased to have you here today with us, Christina. Thank you. Our second guest is Kevin Christensen, who is with Align Financial. And what I also appreciate about Kevin is if you check his LinkedIn profile, he also will use the headline, husband, father, mentor. And when, again, I look at who we are as professionals out in this world right now, I just really think about those big and different ways that we describe ourselves. Last but not least, we've got Nate Hadoo, who is with Hadoo Collective and Moniker Group. There we go, entrepreneurship, right? And representing different brands, starting different brands, and being able to say, this is what I do. So I'm going to throw the big question out there. 2020, life is crazy, and there's a moment when everything changes. And so our friend Kevin can remember not so much even these moments, but specific dates. Kevin, are you ready? Once upon a time in 2020, on April 1st, Kevin becomes a new business owner. And then on April 11th, Kevin becomes a first-time father. So business and baby in April of 2020, which I will not need to remind any of you, which is a few weeks after the great shutdown, right? Kevin, talk to us about that moment and what that did for you as a leader, a father, everything.
Yeah, it was a lot all at once. I mean, not just professionally, but personally, as you mentioned. It was didn't seem like a moment. It seemed like it lasted for weeks and months. But I wouldn't go back and change it if I could. So I made the decision, actually, I think it was a year ago, either today or tomorrow, to launch my business, which was April 1st, right in the middle of the pandemic. 10 days later, my wife and I had our first child, which things were just getting worked out with COVID, and I mean, she was pushing with a mask on, and it was quite the experience not having anyone else in the room. Literally couldn't leave the room for food or anything. So it was quite the experience. But you know, marrying those two things together, it was a little bit hectic for a couple months.
Oh, absolutely. Kevin, tell us about Aligned Financial really quickly. It's such a cool business model.
Yeah, so it's financial planning. So I've been in the industry since graduating from Point Loma in 2009. I actually started as an intern in 2008, which you know, 2020 brought back some memories of the Great Recession that was, you know, 12 years ago. But it's financial planning. It's you know, Aligned Financial was kind of born from how do we align our money with our values. So whatever our values are, whatever is most important to us, how can our money reflect that, whether it's through saving, investing, spending, giving. So we do a lot of work around charitable planning, partnering with different nonprofits like Point Loma and others, and also with sustainable investing to really align with your values.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that, Kevin.
Yeah.
Christina, you joined Illumina, which is known as the world's smartest company, right? And you joined this company dealing with not only getting recruited, getting hired, getting onboarded in the middle of a pandemic. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Rebecca, in preparation for this afternoon session, I was looking at the calendar, and today I turned 6 months old. And I've literally not left this box in what feels like 6 months. So from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting, it was important to me in my career to explore options. If I had an opportunity to stay local and go global, that I needed to pursue it wholeheartedly. And when through the power of networking, I know, Rebecca, you're a big proponent of LinkedIn. I will echo that and underscore it. So through the power of networking, landed this opportunity with Illumina, and it has been quite an adjustment being able to meet 8,000 individuals, one Zoom meeting at a time, you know, taking meetings in London, taking meetings in Singapore, and still, you know, I will have probably turn one before and be that new hire employer going, does anybody know where the restroom is, let alone the printer? So it'll be interesting, and I'm excited to be able to share a little bit about what it is to start a new role in a pandemic and being able to stay connected to a new organization and your coworkers.
So Christina, you've not been to the Illumina campus except for what, picking up your tech, and that was it, right?
It was all shipped to me. So anyone who's driven by the 805 in La Jolla who has seen the Illumina buildings, you know just as much as I do. So again, it's a really interesting dynamic to be able to either watch a YouTube video that's been produced by the marketing department or try to glean something from someone who knows anything about campus. It's an adjustment of being able to say, hey, how do I plug in here? How do I fit in here? And one of the things that was a priority for me in jumping into a new organization was to make sure that I signed up and volunteered myself for projects that have a lot of visibility. And right now, a lot of those projects with visibility are projects in response to COVID. How do we keep our workforce safe? About 1/3 of our employees, about 3,000 of them, are still on campus globally. So when it comes to vaccination responses, when it comes to on-site COVID testing, those aren't sexy projects, but they're projects that touch multiple business functions. And as a communications partner, it was important for me to say, hey, you're going to need some help. I've had support in previous lives and organizations through emergency management response. How can I lend myself to gaining visibility in an organization, gaining visibility in a high priority and high profile projects, which also, and again, internally gave me the opportunity to meet as many people as fast as possible virtually.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. And I do notice some student names as I looked at everyone in the Zoom room here. Really quick, if you were going to describe Illumina in a heartbeat, how would you describe Illumina?
Smart, very smart.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So Nate, you had to pivot to making your company, and then really companies, into essential businesses last year. That was sort of the moment for you, right? So tell us a little bit about both of your companies and then the pivots.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Yeah, I was the moment for me was I was actually had the opportunity to travel to Colorado. I was at a dude ranch, which was a really fun experience with some pastors, and it was the moment the NBA shut down that everyone really realized, like, oh, this is a big deal. And there's pastors all over this ranch in front of like iPads and iPhones filming Instagram videos announcing that they're not meeting on Sunday. And so it's just this surreal environment, and traveling home was just a kind of scary experience because no one knew what was going on. But it's also just the weight of what we're all talking about and what we've all experienced of just this dynamic shift in the way we do everything. And so for the Moniker Group, you know, we run multiple companies, all of which are really built around bringing people together in a room. So that was a really fun equation to solve for. Use the word pivot is definitely, we, you know, over the course of all the emotions we experienced, the highs and lows of just those first few weeks, you know, really understanding the importance of experience problems and expecting to experience problems was definitely something that was helpful. A lot of our spaces are flexible, furniture is movable, our business models are adaptable. So we have a coffee shop in Liberty Station, if you're familiar with it, Moniker General. That became a grocery store about a week after we shut down. So we used all the same exact vendors we had and basically just sold everything raw, which we thought was a value to the community because there's long lines and kind of the scarcity mindset at grocery stores. We had toilet paper, which was a big deal. And that gave us the ability to be essential and kind of stay open and limp along. So just that was definitely a validation of the importance of when we're planning projects, you know, whether it's for a large company or a small company, is always realizing that, you know, things are always going to change. There'll always be problems, but it's our ability to deal with them and adapt that actually gives us the opportunity to create value.
Right. So Nate, your other business though is commercial real estate, which since all of us are at home right now, right? Talk to us about the changes really and the shifts in that piece of your world.
Yes, it's such an interesting thing because it's still changing today. I think people would say that we know who the winners are and we know who the losers are. Doesn't mean we know the full effects, but you can kind of see where the biggest hits have come. You know, hospitality, which Moniker's hospitality company has been hit a lot. One interesting aspect of that briefly is that our sales have actually exceeded all-time highs when we had the 25% open indoors, which was in November. And it's just proving that we were built for community. So as things change, yes, things are going to change, but we're still built the same way. You know, we were created in the image of God. We were created to be in relationship. And so all of us that are in the business of connecting people, that's not gone. It's just changing and adapting, but that desire is still there. Commercial real estate, they always say never waste a good recession. And so, you know, there's with adaptability, it's I think the most difficult part of it is staying positive and keeping your eyes ahead versus freaking out and looking in the rearview mirror or the drama that's right in front of you. And so, you know, last year we were able to help a church purchase a building in Bankers Hill that they'd been trying to buy for probably over 2 years because the owner was planning to build an event center. So he no longer wanted to spend millions of more dollars to renovate a building into an event center. So, and he wanted to sell it to a church, but we couldn't come to terms on price. The pandemic kind of catalyzed this meeting of the minds at what the price should be, and they were able to close on it. They're renovating it right now, and they'll be able to host people later this year. So that's an example of the opportunities that come from these difficult situations. But again, you know, speaking honestly, it's really hard to remain positive and upbeat when you're an entrepreneur and you're responsible to feed your family, when you're responsible, you know, to find a paycheck, to figure out how to get paid. And so that was a big learning experience for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Nate. And I'm sure everyone on this call can absolutely relate to that same sort of like moment in time that you described with like, here are all these pastors saying to their congregations, right? We're not going to meet on Sunday, and how surreal, when you use that word surreal, I think we all remember that from March 2020, right? So I'm going to swing back to Kevin. And Kevin, you had a chance in 2020 to do two things that are huge milestones, right? Starting a business, starting a family, and you did it in a year that we can't use the word unprecedented like too many times, right? But we did it in a year that was just really, really strange. So could you talk to us about just those milestones, the firsts, right? But what it was like for you as a business leader and the lessons that you learned from both starting the family and starting the business.
Definitely. So certainly challenging. I mean, not just the baby in the business, but obviously COVID and, not seeing people face to face, trying to transition clients over and, set up a website and, all the things that go with the new business. So it was certainly a lot. I'm not really sure how I kept my sanity. It was just, wake up and I mean, you throw a market crash in there as well. We had a bear market in March and I would just be staring at my phone, waiting for the clock to strike 6:30 when the market opens and just see how far down it was that day, just because, March was a pretty terrible month and it just kept going down and down. So it was, just really just trucking along and, I didn't really have too many outlets in terms of going to the gym or, going out to restaurants with the pandemic. So it was certainly interesting. The lessons that I've learned, and I think I'm still learning them, today. One of them is to, just really be ready for anything. I mean, I was talking to another business owner. He's actually on this call today, and he said, you're taught to prepare for a 50% revenue drop when you own a business. Something happens, your revenue could drop by 50%. He said, nobody prepares you to lose 100%, literally going, and I'm sure Monica was in that boat as well with having to pivot. That's not something you learn in business school, or that's not something that most professionals or consultants would tell you to plan for. It's a little bit different in my business. I mean, I didn't lose 100% of my revenue. It is tied to the stock market. So revenue did drop, but it also bounced back fairly quickly. But that's one, be prepared for anything. Another one on the personal side is just appreciate family more. I think a lot of us learned that lesson this past year. And, it's not easy being cooped up 24/7 in your house with a family. We have a small house here in North Park, and it's close quarters when my home office is now a nursery. So I, found myself working outside and kind of bouncing around the house, but that was certainly another lesson. Another business lesson was, I was really on the fence. I mean, almost a year ago to the day of, do I want to make this move, not even knowing about COVID, but knowing about our baby coming. And so I was making a pros and cons list. I was trying to figure out, is this something I want to do at this time? And my advice, or I guess the lesson I learned, was just, you do have to prepare for it financially and logistically, but just jump in, take a risk. Sometimes it's necessary to do that.
Awesome. So be prepared for anything, really value family and friends, and then just that sense of just taking a leap sometimes. Awesome. Thank you for that, Kevin.
Of course.
So, Christina, you definitely took a leap into Illumina. You were at your former company for 12 years. All right. Talk about that transition for us. There may be people on this call that are thinking about transition during this time.
Yeah, it admittingly, it's scary. Like it's the unknown, I'm not to use the word unprecedented, especially as a communicator, but it's there and it's prevalent. And it was important. It was a couple of things, Rebecca, that really triggered the sense of movement for me. And I would say one of them was the George Floyd incident, last year. As a woman of color, as a minority leader in many of my organizations, whether they're professional or community-based, I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to be able to, the line of corporate America and my values kind of got too close for comfort. And it was important for me to make sure that I was still and listening and making sure I was listening to God's plan for what was necessary for the power or sphere of influence that I have available to me. And Illumina's values organizationally really aligned with my personal values and my belief system, and saying, hey, here's an organization that believes in the things that I do when it comes to workplace inclusion and equity. And so building a community has always been important to me. And being able to turn around and then put that into a workplace practice, especially in a pandemic, to say, not only do I not agree with this organizationally, but now I'm going to make a move in my career. I had to really prioritize that more than I ever have as part of my interviewing process. I'm a former executive recruiter, so being able to help people prepare for their interviews is in my blood. I've been in trouble for talking too much my entire life. And so why not have that same priority for myself? Why not being able to ask and say, hey, I've got the opportunity in my career to join a new organization, to ask questions that we're asking ourselves as leaders within our homes, within our communities, and within our society. And I made that a priority during my hiring practice as well, in interviewing, and me interviewing the organization. So that ability to lessons learned is to lean into and to have faith in what it is that your values are, and not being afraid to make that a priority for you as you're making a move through your career. It was scary, it was unknown, but it was important, and it was one of my driving factors that I had to be able to honor as well.
Awesome. So again, I think what I'm hearing from you, Christine, is that emphasis on the values. And really being able to assess your values and then really act on your values was a huge lesson that you not only had a chance to learn, but really had a chance to play out last year.
It's something that's been prevalent in every other aspect. Why wouldn't I make it as even more prevalent now?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then you did mention before that you found the job on LinkedIn.
I did. Yeah, I found it on. I know. I'm going to plug it for you, Rebecca. Don't you
need to plug it, right? Yes. Now, and I'll just say this, since we're on this call for alumni relations, there are 15,000 alums on our LinkedIn, right? And 5,000 or so of those alums are in San Diego. So I tell students all the time, you have the ability to connect with some really great people who've gone through experiences at this campus that you are going through. And to definitely use that network. So here you are working at Illumina from a post on LinkedIn. Thank you, Christina. Nate, lessons learned 2020. Where do you go with that, right?
Yeah, I think I appreciated what Christina said about values. I think, you know, knowing that there's undergrad and graduate students, you know, listening in and participating today, is realizing that there's ways to pursue your values that don't necessarily require you becoming an entrepreneur. For example, I'm an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was an employee for 12 years of my career, and I'm only 14 years into my career, right? But I always had a value, like Christina said, of wanting to have the ability to build my own company, be independent, and control the priorities of my life. And so you mentioned at the beginning, the Forbes article about a side hustle, is I always say that the best time to start a job or start a company is when you have a job. And so you don't have to quit your job to go pursue the values. And I think that's like something that I think is important to remember in the conversation. And, you know, how that applies to me is, like you talked about, and I talked about earlier, about shifting and pivoting. And, you know, Kevin said being prepared for anything is really trying to manage your own expectations about the reality that problems will come, and that things are hard, and that you will not always do everything really good. And I'm number 3 on the Enneagram. I love being like perfect. I get stuck in perfectionism sometimes. And I like what Kevin said about sometimes you just got to step out and do it. It's like my business partner at Moniker, his name's Ryan Sisson, is a great friend, dear friend. And I called him while I was an employee and said, hey, here's this opportunity I have for us to open a retail store, and we can put a coffee shop in it. Ryan had never been in retail. I've never been in retail. Ryan doesn't even drink caffeinated coffee. And we're talking about opening a coffee shop. And we both just said, sure, like, let's just figure it out. And it took us a long time. It was not hard. It's very difficult to make money when you have that much going on, like at a coffee shop. But we've grown so much and learned so much. And so I think 2020 really proved, personally, the need to manage my expectations that problems will come. Even when I get really excited, I'm excitable. And so when new projects come, I get really excited, and sometimes I can get really discouraged quickly when I face the difficulty of whatever it is that I need to do to execute this idea. So I think just manage your own expectations going in, that there will be a lot of challenges. I do need to be prepared for anything. And there's a way to pursue your values, but let's just understand that that's going to be hard, and hard doesn't mean that it's wrong. But like I mentioned earlier, that's where you create value. There's no value created in not solving a problem. Otherwise, it's not a problem, then there's no value to create. Peter Thiel talks about that a lot. Elon Musk talks about that a lot. There's like, go solve someone's problem, and there's value there. And so I think realizing that solving problems comes with facing a challenge that's hard is sometimes something we don't like to admit is reality. And I ride a roller coaster of emotions. I'm an emotional person. So my wife, God bless her, for riding the ride with me. But that's, I think, something that I could grow in, and I think would be helpful for folks listening in, of manage your own expectations that's coming. It doesn't mean you shouldn't feel the feelings, but just don't be discouraged by the difficulty that you're experiencing. The book Grit is a great example of that, of being willing to stick through it. And I think that's something I'm really trying to take into heart, because it's not as if, everyone hoped it, but 2021 did not wipe away the issues we're all facing. But trying to be gritty and be committed to the path you're on in the face of challenges, I think, is something I've really learned and tried to prioritize in my own life.
Absolutely. And what I appreciate about just what you just shared with us, Nate, is that sense of like solving the problems. I mean, that's the work, right? I think what this last, unemployment craziness showed us, especially when we were up in like, the 20%, 25% unemployment last year, is that if you're solving problems, you're always going to have work to do. We're always going to have work to do. Maybe it's sometimes figuring out that there are some different problems to solve. So just really appreciate that you shared that with us. So Chelsea from the Alumni Office did put in the chat that we do welcome questions. What I'm going to look for are questions that all three of our panelists can answer, or at least speak into. If you have something that you want to ask an individual panelist, here's where I want to really, really encourage you, as Christina knows I'm going to say this, catch our guests on LinkedIn, start a conversation, start a connection. This is the way that we want to roll, right? So my final question before I open it up is to ask our guests about faith, because we can on this call, right? And Nate, I'm going to start with you. When you think about getting through 2020 as a business leader, share a word or two about faith.
Yeah, it's a great one. I think when I was thinking through the concept of this question, I was just kept going back to this book that I had the opportunity to read during the shutdown. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it's written by a pastor from the Pacific Northwest. And the concept of the book is that the biggest barrier to your relationship with God is hurry. And I was so convicted. I felt like he was writing the book about me. And I think pre-COVID, it was very easy to be, for it to be acceptable and even expected to be busy, right? And in the book he talks about, and we can all relate to the small talk conversations we would be having if we were together on campus, and someone says, how are you? How many of your friends or colleagues say, oh, I'm really good, busy? And COVID gave everyone the opportunity to not be busy, right? And be at home, and a lot of things slowed down for a minute there. And so I think reading that book, really feeling convicted that I'm a high energy person. When I wake up, I start thinking about the day, and my mind is like a little hamster, just like running all the time. And I think I burn a ton of calories just thinking. And so having that permission to stop going to meetings, to stop having to be at the office at a certain time, to even stop having to, get up and do the routine of like taking a shower and shaving and like getting dressed, it's like, oh, I can skip a lot of this. I have all this extra time. And stop and say, what is a way that I can unhurry my life, and admit that I have an addiction to stimulation, and that we as a culture, Western society, have an addiction to stimulation and the concept of success. I don't think we should not be driven. I think God created us with giftings that we have an opportunity to use for the world. But at the same time, God's not asking us to use those gifts unless we're really aligned and tight with Him. And so for me, that meant waking up before my son wakes up. I have a 2.5-year-old, and waking up early and trying to read more often, and trying to actually slow down my life. So I think that has really bolstered my faith and maybe even peace that has helped me deal with the emotional roller coaster that 2020 delivered.
Awesome. So Nate mentioned that he's excitable, right? So literally after our prep call the other day, I ordered the book that he mentioned, Ruthless, Elimination, right, of hurrying, because he just made such a compelling argument for like, we need to read this book. So thank you for that, Nate. And thank you for sharing how your faith has taken you through these times. Christina, what about you?
Yeah, 2 things, Rebecca, came to mind. One of them, inspired by Nate, is just the busyness of things. I am used to, floating after work from community engagement event to networking event to community event to networking event, and having this huge full social calendar. I thrived on the busyness. And I remember March, April, where just everything was just shut down. And the Psalm, "Be still and know that I am God," just really came into play. And just the pause, it was a forced pause. And then going through this job search, it required me just to kind of get inspired differently. And I call the shower my think tank. That's where I'm the most inspired, is the shower and the think tank. And I was like, I would get this anxious energy. I'm like, what do I do in order to calm myself down? And where did I end up defaulting to was my faith in growing up listening to gospel music, and coming back to, in the think tank, would just be that quiet morning. Instead of thinking, instead of going through my list, instead of going through my day, it would just be a pause and an opportunity for me to reconnect through gospel music, and just going about reinvigorating and being inspired and being still more than anything. So I think in this time is just to find the things that where you can build connection. Kevin mentioned it. It may have been other things that we used to fill our time with, and now really having to rely back on our value system in order to make that a reality for all of us.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Christina. Kevin, faith and 2020.
My experience is a little bit different. So January 2020, I joined an accountability group. So we had weekly calls. I had an awesome morning routine with meditation, prayer, exercise, reading, all these things. And it completely got derailed in March, in April. So partly with the business, the market, the baby, I just really got out of the habit of doing all those things. And now there's very little me time and little downtime with everything going on. But it's kind of become more important again now with the baby, knowing that, I'm bringing a child into the world, or my wife did, but just really making sure that I am, kind of on my game, and also teaching him as well. So I think when I probably needed my faith the most during COVID, I don't feel like I was really putting in the time like I was leading up to it. And it was tougher, with, like Nate said, with churches closing, and, you're trying to watch church on Zoom. It's just not quite the same without the community. But that was my experience. And that is also one of my lessons from 2020, is to really make that a focus no matter what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have what I call a good problem, which is that there are lots of really awesome questions that have been directed for me to process and throw at you. But here's the one I'm going to pick, and then we'll look at our time. So with a nod to my friend and associate, Diana Grant Davey, who's one of our alums, The question is, Nate, Christina, Kevin, what are you hopeful for in 2021? What are you looking forward to? What's something that you are absolutely just hopeful for? And I'll just let you
Yeah. Rebecca,
go when you're ready.
I'll start off with that one. I would say the fact that science is back and working for a life sciences technology organization, I'm hopeful for the renewed sense of community and the different sense of community that we'll go about building. Now, I mean, to Kevin's point too, family has just been a very different family or family, however, which way you shape it, has been a very different experience for all of us through this pandemic. And I am hopeful for the renewed sense of community that this global pandemic will bring to us.
Awesome, thank you.
I would say, I know we're supposed to kind of talk about business stuff, but one of the things I'm most hopeful for is I just have loved what COVID created and is still creating for my relationship with my son, who's 2.5. And so he rides a scooter and he has a Strider bike, and we hang out like, I'll go home from work at like 4 and we'll go to the skate park, which I hope no one that a client of mine is listening, but we'll go home at like 4 o'clock, go to the skate park for like 2 hours and give mom a break. And so I just, just to be honest, I love what I do for my career. I love, and I'm really hopeful and excited for the reconnection of people in our spaces at Moniker. We opened an event space on the water on Harbor Drive downtown mid-COVID. So that was really cool to have an 8,000 square foot waterfront venue that sits empty since then. So I'm really excited and hopeful to see that full and see people together again, which I think is close on the horizon. But to be honest, personally, I'm just really excited and continue to be hopeful for the positive impacts that COVID had on my life, or at least the forced shutdowns of COVID. I don't know that there's any positive impacts of COVID itself, but the forced kind of changes that came upon us, like Christina did a good job summarizing. I'm just hopeful and positive on carrying those forward and being changed. And I think that we are and will be changed, but focusing on those positives and carrying them forward is definitely something that I'm hopeful for.
Absolutely. And Nate, what you shared about your relationship with your son during this time, I've heard from so many of my other employers who are dads, and specifically new dads or newer dads. I feel like this season is going to bring something really kind of different in terms of what our families are like in the future. So thank you for sharing that. Kevin, what are you hopeful for 2021?
Yeah, a couple things. I guess business-wise, and well, I guess it crosses over to personal, but similar to what Christina said, just getting back to being able to engage with people, back to community. That's something that I thrive on and that I've really missed. You can certainly get some of that, through Zoom, and there are some benefits of that as well. But just looking forward to getting back to whatever the new normal is in terms of society. Not walking down the street and kind of walking on the side of the sidewalk when you cross people and all of that. It's just been really strange. But personally, looking forward to the milestones for my son. He's 10 months old. So the next few months, walking and talking and all of those things, really looking forward to that. And that was another blessing that happened last year was, my wife asked me how much time I was going to take off of work. And I said, I don't know, maybe a week. And turns out I was at home for 5 months. And, that was a huge blessing to just be able to be around my son a lot more than expected.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the interest of time, I'm actually going to kind of get creative with some questions. I've got one question that I'm going to direct to Christina and Nate in terms of leadership and working with teams. And then I'm going to finish out with a question to Kevin, given the uniqueness of his situation from last year. So Nate and Christina, thinking about your leadership specifically with managing people and leading your teams, talk to us about how that's different and new in 2021.
Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Well, I think one big one that, we've focused a lot on the pandemic, but, at Moniker Group, we have a lot of faith-driven values, and the structure of the company is led from that worldview, but it's not a forward-facing spiritual company or Christian company. And so one of the things that was very evident with us is that we wanted to be more proactive about the injustices that were heavily exposed in 2020. So we created a DEI committee, and that has been a really cool way to engage the company and allow the staff to really participate. We have a committee, a staff-led committee, that is leading kind of the voice of the group to create specific initiatives that we are implementing. And I think Ryan, who's CEO of the company and kind of runs day-to-day ops, has said really well, is like, we're all going to be different coming out of this, you know, both from those issues and then also the things that have been caused by COVID. We want to be better. And these are long-term things that need to happen. There's not short-term drops in the bucket that are going to solve any of these problems. And so I think seeing these alternative ways we could connect in person and digitally, but also things we can rally around, like Christina was talking a lot about values at the beginning. And I think that's something that has held kind of the cohesiveness of our company. Is there's a lot of shared values, some of which are religious, some of which have nothing to do with religion at our company. Being together, kind of like a family, I love that word, is one of them. And then also rallying around how can we be, you know, a hand and voice of change for injustices and issues that really need active participation from companies like ours. And you know, we were 50 people before COVID. We're a little less than that now, but so we're not Illumina, but at the same time, we're 40 people, and we're local. We're San Diego, and we have a lot of room to grow personally and as a company. And so I think that was a kind of surprising way that no one expected, but has created a kind of new form of connection to talk about things other than just the work we do kind of inside the facilities, but you know, the work we're doing, you know, socially and across the community as a whole. So that's been a unique way, I think, to re-engage is opportunities of impact and value that have nothing to do with selling coffee or, you know, hosting a wedding. So
absolutely, and yet have everything to do with, right? Yeah. Christina, leadership and teams.
Two things come to mind. I think that the expectation of vulnerability in the workplace and the vulnerability as a leader has definitely been more apparent in my leadership style as I've shifted in a pandemic. There would be definitely just a smidge of room of like, we're coworkers, but there's still that boss-employee relationship. And a pandemic, you've had to be able to connect with people differently than you would because you don't have the interpersonal exchanges that you would. Being able to read tone, whether it be through IM or whether it be through email, like it just takes on a completely different level. And with a newer team and being new to an organization, I've really had to open up myself more than I would normally as a person, as a human, just to be able to connect with individuals. We work all various types of hours. And with that, I don't need you to be online 12 hours a day. There should be space for your work-life integration. And you have to take that. You have to take that and you have to lean into it. And as a leader, I have to tell my people, hey, if you need to take a nap at lunch, like that's what you need to do to get your game on. If you need to leave at 4 to get to the skate park, that's what you need to do in order to move life forward.
Yes.
So I think the vulnerability of showing up as a human, as a leader, has definitely changed my leadership style. Second would end up being, I'm in a position of hiring. And so talking about just the unveiling that our nation has gone through, it's also important for me to make sure that I am leading by example and making sure that the candidate and the candidate pool that I'm choosing from and the conversations I'm having with my recruiter and my interviewing panel is inclusive, whether that be inclusive of gender, inclusive of beliefs, inclusive of whatever the background is. I have a responsibility as a leader to make sure that I am doing my part to be as fair and equitable in a hiring practice as possible too, more even than I have in the past, especially as a minority employee. So it's those two things of being human as a leader and showing up and making sure that your employees are also human and that practice of self-care, and two, making sure that I am leading by example when it comes to diversity in the workplace.
Awesome. Very well said, Christina. Thank you so much. Our final question, which is going to be for you, Kevin, is actually the first question which came in, and it was about confidence. Again, new baby, new business, and you said you made a leap. But how did you get that confidence? Where did that confidence come from?
It's a good question. I think, I mean, I've been in the industry. I think this is year 12 or 13 now. So I think confidence does come over time. Just knowing that I, can do good work for my clients. I can run a business. I mean, I kind of always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I did start a company probably 6 or 8 years ago. And then I kind of had a business within a business with my old company doing financial planning. But I think part of it, I would say time, and part of it is you're always going to have that head trash, those doubts that, maybe you don't feel like you are confident or you can take on something like that. And that's just, it's all mental. Most people, I would say, are capable of, starting a business or changing careers or, whatever it might be.
Awesome. Christina, Nate, Kevin, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I know that you'll probably have some LinkedIn invitations coming up, and I will turn us over right now to Jeffrey Bogart.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you all for our panelists here. I'm just going to give a quick closing remarks, and then we'll get you guys out on the rest of your day. But just really wanted to say thank you all so much for participating and giving back to the Business Alumni Group. We're so happy to have you. We're so happy to hear from you. I know for me personally, 2020, just like a lot of us, had been a big change. And I know I took some nuggets of wisdom from you guys. So thank you so much again for your participation. Also just wanted to shout out Rebecca Smith. Thank you so much for just being an amazing moderator today. We really appreciated your participation in this event. And she, again, just so it's clear, she's the executive director of PLNU's Career Services. So if you wanted to reach out to Rebecca directly, she's available on LinkedIn. And I know she'd be really willing to help in any way she can and connect with other alumni out there. Lastly, I just wanted to make sure that I gave quick shout outs to 2 of our event sponsors today, one being Kevin's company, Align Financial. Like he mentioned, they are a financial advisory firm, boutique firm that specializes in financial planning and consulting through a process that integrates environmental and social factors into their investment strategy. So reach out to Kevin if you have more questions about that. And then also Bauman Photographers, just wanted to make sure we give them a plug. They are both a wedding and commercial photography studio located here in San Diego. So we're glad to have their support as well. Finally, just wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to the rest of the board. Thank you so much to Derek Legg, our president, who did just such an amazing job in curating this event, and the rest of our board members for the work that went into putting this event on. Thank you guys so much for your dedication to the school. And definitely wanted to let everyone on this call know that there's a number of ways that you can engage with the Alumni House if you want to get more involved. Believe it or not, we're going to have some more events coming up, and you can always volunteer to sponsor or host an event. We have a LinkedIn page and a Facebook page where you can engage with us. We've got an email list that we'll be sending out updates to, and then we're always welcoming donations for the Scholarship Endowment Fund. And we have some student opportunities as well. So any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. There's the email address below, or find us on Facebook or LinkedIn. So I just wanted to close us out with a quick word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for bringing us all here together this afternoon. I know that the pandemic has changed and shifted a lot of lives and a lot of industries, but the great thing about you, Lord, is that you are unchanging, you are unshakable. You're the same today and yesterday, and I just pray that with all this change that's gone on, that we wouldn't busy ourselves more, that we wouldn't get more uncomfortable, that we would just rest in you that we would be still and know that you are God. Lord, I just pray for each one of these folks on the call this afternoon. I pray that you would comfort them and that you would use each one of these alumni to be a light to the world, God. We love you so much, and we thank you for this time. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you.